Waiting for, shouldn't that be on?
Sometimes.
There we go.
Here we go.
Technical difficulties, will be there. Okay, it being about 7 o'clock, we'll call tonight's Finance Committee budget hearing to order. First order of business is public comments. Sir. Either way. Your name and address, please.
Hi, my name's Ted McIntyre. I've lived at 34 Jefferson Road for the last 30 years. Thanks, Steve. I'd like to recommend that you, as the Finance Committee, consider the following: that it is in Franklin's best long-term interest to hire a sustainability manager. It would be an investment that pays off over several decades. As you know, climate change is happening right now with financial damage, fires, storms, droughts, heat waves, other extreme events. These are already apparent. These will continue over the next decades. The impacts are locked in and will have consequences here in Franklin. As a town, we should begin to prepare to face those consequences, because they're going to happen whether we are prepared or not. As we look into the immediate future, we see that there is an increasing amount of money available from the federal government to address clean energy and climate issues. Franklin needs to take advantage of that money. This is where the sustainability manager comes in. While the exact job definition varies from community to community, that person could identify grant opportunities, paid in part with federal or state money, and help implement those changes that we are likely going to be forced to do anyway. The sustainability manager is a good investment, one that essentially pays for itself. The city of Quincy has had a director for 10 years. That role brought in $15.9 million, or roughly $1.6 million a year into the town. We estimate in general that the role brings in between 4 and 8 times the salary each year. These are good ROI numbers. A sample of some of the specific things that have happened in that town are to bring in $1.2 million in green community grant funding over the years. Remember that Franklin is now applying for the climate leader status, right, which is the follow-on project to the Green Communities project, so there'll be money there. That manager also brought in $600,000 towards buying electric school buses. Of course, you could say these grants lead to new spending that the town's not currently contemplating. Fair enough. It would have to go on a special budget. But I want you to think about the idea that this kind of work can reduce the cost of operations of the town. For example, by reducing energy costs that go directly to the town's bottom line. For example, what if we didn't need to buy diesel fuel to run the buses and could run our school buses with cheaper electric fuel? I suppose we had a grant to increase the efficiency of buildings and had to pay less to heat them. In this way, the presence of a sustainability manager has the potential to cut budgeted costs. In a time where we can foresee Franklin being hit by potential economic storms stemming from actual atmospheric storms, wisdom calls on us to prepare. There will be a Franklin here in the year 2050. We should use our long-term thinking to create the best town for our children to live in. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Sherlock.
Yes, Steve Sherlock, 13 Magnolia Drive. Notice there's new microphones here. They're self-adjustable. They're not trying to get rid of me. It was my own idea. We saw them. It's like, oh, look it. That makes it easier. So it also gives me 2 opportunities. One, remind you to use the mic that's in front of you. Otherwise, I'll have to get up and point it to you, because especially when you start sitting back and putting your arms behind, which you can do on late times, but don't speak when you do that. Please let your voice be heard. You're volunteering on our behalf. We need your voice. We value your voice, so I thank you for your volunteering effort. And then the second piece, clearly, normally on this channel at this time, Planning Board, they're upstairs on a different channel. So if you're on Comcast, drop down 1 from 9 to 8. If you're on Verizon, drop down 1 from 29 to 28, and you get the Planning Board. If you really want to find out what's happening, this is the Finance Committee. This is where it's at. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
How do you like that? Yes, Mark Minichelli at 31 Longfellow Drive in Franklin. I'd like to just continue along the same lines that Ted spoke about previously, about the town of Franklin's possibility of hiring a sustainability coordinator. Now, I know Jamie had originally had that in his original budget proposal for this year, and with the huge gap, he chose to pull it out. Several of us are working on putting together a data package that we would like to review and that we will review with Jamie and Amy and perhaps some of the town councilors if there's enough time. I'd like to share just a little bit more data. Ted talked to you about actual numbers from the town, from Quincy, city of Quincy. But in addition to Quincy, we've also spoken with Natick. Natick has had similar results. With a population of about 36,000, which is pretty similar to Franklin's. They hired a sustainability coordinator, and that sustainability coordinator brought in $556,000 over each year over a 10-year period, more than paid for itself. The town of Westford, population of about 25,000, was able to get an ROI of between 4 and 8 times the sustainability director's salary there. There's a couple of other towns that we are still working on getting more information about that has had similar results of multi-million-dollar payback for an investment that was far less than that amount. So we would like for all of you to consider the pros and cons of hiring a sustainability coordinator for the town of Franklin. There are many of us that think it will actually help us close this budget gap rather than widen it. There are some, I guess, accounting details that cause some concerns about where the money comes in and where it gets accounted for. I don't understand that. You all probably do, but I would encourage you to consider the total bottom line and how this can impact it. Thank you.
Anyone else? This is a new event, having people talk. Mr. Helen?
Sure, through you,
Oh,
Mr.
approval of minutes.
Yeah, you have minutes first. Don't forget
I
about,
don't see them in any of the packets here. Did,
they were attached in the agenda.
no, they're not.
April 17th.
No, there's nothing there. Tell you what, we'll do them the next time.
Sure.
Wednesday night, if you would.
Sure.
Just move them on.
It'll be the 15th, if that's okay. Yep. And then the next item is the pledge document that was unanimously approved by the council last week relative to the override. I did a long slideshow on it. The superintendent and I presented last week for a few hours. As I said there, it's not a legal requirement, but if you look at the town of Norwood and others, usually when you go into an override discussion for the community, there's unity. Unity is extremely critical to the successful passage of one. And thought the Finance Committee might want to discuss it really quickly. If the Finance Committee doesn't want to do it for whatever reason, it's understood, but ultimately, the entire town council saw the broader picture of it all. And I'm sure most of you probably watched that meeting and watched that debate, or at least heard of it or whatnot. So I'm happy to answer any questions folks have. I do want to make sure that this doesn't dovetail off into a long discussion. We can take it up next week if people really want to as well, but we have a lot of other business to get to, but just putting it there for the FinCom's consideration.
Anybody have questions, comments?
About the override? I do.
Yeah,
I guess,
About the pledge?
the pledge.
oh, the pledge. The pledge itself, no, it was more about the override and how it affects budget. But should I hold that question?
No, you can ask me.
Well, I think
I mean, but we're going through line by line, with obviously this big vote coming up next month, that I feel like could shift things dramatically. As we go through the line items, will there be discussion of, if an override passes, this is how it changes?
Tough question. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I put out a budget that I felt represented, a lot of different areas and stakeholders in the departments, right? I think, in my view, what's here is the best budget still that can be put out there. I understand that the school department has asked for a 13% increase, and there's a myriad of reasons why that situation has arrived. It is not just one factor, as I think most of you are aware. I think my professional opinion is this. I think the Finance Committee needs to look at the budget tonight in the way that it's been presented, either for or against certain issues that are in here, although I gotta tell you right now, there's not really a whole heck of a lot of difference between last year or the years before and what's here now, just because there is no real new spending in my proposed budget. To the folks that spoke at the citizen comments, it was a goal of the councils to have a sustainability coordinator, but as you can imagine, there's just not room for everything in the budget. I mean, that's about at least an $85,000 a year salary and $30,000 worth of benefits roughly in that. I'm fully on board with the sustainability coordinator, by the way, 100% on board with it. The moment I have the money, I will hire somebody. It is not like something I'm against or anybody else is against. It's just, we're getting to the point where there's really so much bandwidth. And I still am going to recommend to the council on the 23rd to approve the town administrator's budget as presented and or recommended from the Finance Committee as well. I think those are really important. As I laid out the other night, depending on whether the override passes or fails, one way or the other, we're going to be going back to do a budget review 2 weeks later at the council to have to do a budget adjustment anyway. It really just depends about how much detail do y'all want to get into tonight and during these hearings about what goes, what doesn't. A good example is what's on screen. If you're looking at Department 111, and as you know, we just go through each line item. If the override doesn't pass, I'll probably cut, for example, a couple $1,000s or recommend a couple $1,000s in reductions in this line item. People may say, well, what's the impact for just the town council budget? Well, the MMA annual dues have gone up over the last couple of years, so it's a higher number than what it was in '23. And also, that's for other meetings and conferences too. Are meetings and conferences not important? No, I think they are important, especially when volunteers want to go, like a finance committee, to go to the annual finance committee seminar. Town councilors go to those things too. If an override doesn't pass, eventually I'll go through the budget, scrub it out with the superintendent, and try to work out with the superintendent, like where exactly are we going to cut, how much does each side cut, and how do we get through the budget in FY25 with as little pain as possible. And so there's going to have to be some serious conversations that, about whether or not you use rainy day money or whether there's other one-time revenues you're going to have to use, and all of that stuff. It's just very, very challenging because I'll give you one other example is the school budget that was approved on April 9th did not include the reduction in health insurance that we negotiated. So their budget was at 9.6 assumption, but it was really 7.6. So the school budget has to adjust their numbers as well over the next 2 months, depending on whether one passes on June 11th or not. So the intention that I had, at least tonight, was to go through the budget as presented. But if the Finance Committee wants to go into deeper details and try to figure out what to cut if something doesn't happen, we can do that. But I would imagine that's going to be a long debate.
No, that's helpful. It's just good to have context, especially when we were talking about that sustainability coordinator, like, if the override passes, does that go away? Like, there's just so much in the air that's a little tricky.
I'll be honest, unfortunately, it is. I think these questions you're asking, Natalie, are questions I've been getting blitzkrieged with all weekend, right? And will continue to get. And as I've mentioned for 5 years, an override in general in Massachusetts is a community engagement exercise unlike no other. And it takes a very, very long time to educate every single citizen in the way they view it And the most common email or comment I get is, well, I just want to know the answer to these 3 questions or 2 questions before I vote. Fair enough. People should have those questions answered. But there are a lot of questions. And we are going to probably continue to have more questions. Just like the 40%, right? The other night. I put up why 40% and I explained it. And then there's going to be more questions off of that. And then more questions off of that. That's just the nature of overrides. That's just the way they work. They take a very, very long time to marinate within the community, to get all those questions and concerns out there. I got an email today asking about whether we needed all the phone money that's in the budget. Can we get rid of the phones? You know, people are on cell phones. Those are all great questions. They really are. Like, that could save a lot of money, but the answer is no until the lease is up. So there's just a lot of questions that I think are going to continue to come. What I would think you could do is, through this line item breakdown over the next few nights, is dig into some of that and maybe continue to ask questions that you all have about how that may play in or out of, you know, some of the spending in the future relative to an override. But my personal opinion is, not just because I wrote it, but because I think the pledge is pretty clear about what's eligible out of that 40%. Other than that 40%, people shouldn't really be unclear, because everything else goes to account 300. So outside of that, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Sorry, thank you.
I
I
have
have-
a,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead, go
I
ahead.
have a question more about the dates. The June 26th date, where you reconvene after the override vote. Are decisions made at that date? Like, for example, if it's a negative override, are decisions made, or is it more of just a general coming together and sort of thinking about next steps, or is that actually a decision-making meeting?
It would definitely be a decision-making meeting, because what essentially you would see for FY25 is this account 300 would go up by 6 points. The budget would go up in terms of revenue. And then you'd have to put those funds in the accounts for facilities and the accounts for the schools.
Okay.
That's the joyous part, of it,
Yes,
right? I
right.
think is people would say, wow, this is great. You know, but the tough part is the other side. Is that if it doesn't pass, you know, how does that go? But the June 26th date would be, it's not the last day you can revise the budget, but it's really the last day before the fiscal year starts, where all the departments will then know where they stand.
Okay.
So the June 26th town council meeting will definitely be a decision day for
Okay.
sure.
Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, thank you for putting this together. We all know was a long time coming, and wasn't taken lightly by anybody, and it was a lot of work. So thank you for that, and if they do watch, thank you to the town council and the school committee and everybody else that's been involved, because I watched the meetings, I wasn't part of them, but they were long, and they're going to continue to be long. So thank you to everybody for spending the time that they have to get this together. One question that I kind of have, and it has to do with the budget and this as well, in the narrative piece, the long-term plan is mentioned. There's like a 5-year plan of different things, that, like a wish list type of thing. I don't know if that's been put to numbers. And then what I wondered was, this 60-40 split ends in fiscal year 30. So is there a thought to maybe do, I know it's hard, you can't do a crystal ball, but like a 10-year plan or something, so the community and we as the finance committee could kind of see long-range goals. In fiscal year 30, we're going to have this, what is it, $6.3 million in the general fund. What are we gonna do with that then? You know, what's the thought? So will there be a plan?
All
into
awesome,
place?
awesome questions. In terms of the words long-range plan, or whatever the term was you just
I
used,
don't know what
Heather,
it is, yeah.
like, it's in there. I'm sure it was like, there is a, if you really dig into each budget, you'll see in each department kind of where they're going.
Yeah,
I would love to say that we could stand up here and give a master plan of, you know, 5 years financial forecast. We do the overall high-level financial forecast, but we don't necessarily do the individual departments, and mainly because we've never had the money even close to even get into all these wish list items. Mainly our budget every year has been maintenance level service. So I would love to say that we have packaged all together. We have a budget and fiscal analyst position that is posted, and we hope to hire by the start of the fiscal year. And that job is essentially trying to get me out of having to do the day-to-day minutia of long-range planning. In terms of the operating budget, we've never had the staff capacity, nor have the schools really, to be able to think that strategically, that collaboratively for that long of a time period, much more than a few years. The capital plan is different. Those are pretty well baked out, 5 years or so. Obviously, you don't know when a stove's gonna break or something, but you know, the bigger picture, which has been on those slides I've done the last couple meetings of future water, you know, rates and the police station and some of that stuff, the capital plan is pretty well done for probably 5 to 10 years. But the long-range planning, I'm just being honest with people. I mean, this whole budget, everything that's done here, and I appreciate your comments before, is done by myself, Amy, Karen, Chris, and Carrie, and Linda in our finance office. I mean, I wrote this budget narrative 4 or 5 years ago. We've been trying to get better at it. If you look at a town like Natick, they probably have 4 people on their staff that do nothing but budget writing, or Arlington, right? Those communities have far more bandwidth and capacity to do what you're talking about. I think Franklin is getting close to there. We need to be there.
Yeah.
I couldn't disagree more. I couldn't agree more. But we're just not built staff-wise to be able to project out to that level of specificity at that level of long-range planning, certainly more than a few years. The only reason, by the way, I took 5 years was because there's obviously a lot of concern from people in Franklin about just too much spending, right? There's a lot of people concerned about the affordability of Franklin. There are a lot of people worried, maybe some people don't hear from these folks, but I do. There are people worried that they're getting costed and out of Franklin, right? And Norwood, in talking to the staff there, had a lot of the same concerns, and they seem to believe that having at least some certainty to people that, hey, we're gonna go for an override that, in Norwood's case, never had passed an override in their town history. And they said, geez, you know, if we can give some assurity to the citizens that this is the one time we're gonna go to the well, that would possibly drum up more support. And, you know, I think that the similar type concerns here in Franklin, you're
So I
gonna
think-
hear of them already.
Thank you. I think that, so the question is really, there appears to be a plan for the first 5 years, but there isn't a plan in place right now. We don't have the staff to formulate the
Well,
plan.
no,
Is that
it's-
kind of what you're saying?
Well, just in general, I don't have the staff to formulate it because I'm doing it. So I gotta get this off my plate so I can free up my time to do other things and have somebody else dedicated towards historical data context, dedicated to longer range planning, understanding the whole, both for the town and
So the
schools.
goal is you are
But
hiring
after
somebody,
5
so
years,
we'll
just
have
so you-
somebody do that then.
Well, I hope so.
Okay.
But also,
No, I know, I just want to know.
But also, after 5 years, that money just all goes into the general fund. But I think what I've mentioned to a lot of people, and you probably saw it, Heather, watching, if you don't have an agreement for year 2 of an override,
Yeah.
if you don't have something, well, maybe some people don't know, then the whole 6.8 goes back into the general fund and then comes back through the regular process. So as the school business administrator said the other night, without some sort of framework, it becomes the Wild West. So that's the only reason why I chose the 5 years. So just so you know, it's not like at the end of 5 years, like there's some plan. It's just at the end of the 5 years, we could have picked 3 years, we could have picked 2 years, we could have picked 10 years. But I did that not so much for budget planning, as much as it was to try to send a signal to some taxpayers that were very concerned about the cost of living in town, that we weren't gonna come looking for an override every year, right? That's the nervousness from a lot of people in Franklin was like, well, the schools will just ask for another override next year, and then an override the next year after that. Well, we took that off the table with this kind of framework.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? You answered the questions that I scribbled on my copy, so.
Well, they asked them first.
Yeah, I know. But they got answered in any case.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because I've heard that question too, and from about the schools and potentially losing that funding. But that would basically mean, I just think about the way we always budget, that I've been on the last couple of years, and it's, you know, you look at last year's and then you look at this year's, and it's usually a plus a little bit. So wouldn't it be like a plus, like a certain percentage, like the, by bucket, like, so we're going through here and it's going from 6 to 7, you know, this is typically how it work. Are people concerned that schools would go like, whatever, 80 million to, they just wouldn't get it, it would go back to 72, and that 8 million would filter all to, it just seems like we're, like,
I don't
from
read
a realistic
Facebook.
standpoint, like, it would be like, we're, that just,
Yes, that's what people
okay,
think.
I just want, I just
No,
want
I
to
think I think there are people, yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's, again, that's not a critique of individuals who think that. It's that's how, it takes a lot of one-on-one conversation and emails and discussions for people to really understand all of the facts. And so I think there are some people who, for whatever reason, are nervous that might happen.
Yeah.
Or somewhere in between is probably more common, right?
Yeah.
You know, but I think everybody that watched, at least I think I took a lot of that air out of the room by saying, no, actually, it's just an accounting thing. Account 300 is the schools, but actually a lot of school driving costs are elsewhere in the budget,
Yeah.
right? And just the Remington Jefferson and Horace Mann borrowing alone, you know, is basically 35% of that 40%. So I think a lot of people saw in that 40%, I think for 4 or 5 days, people were saying some of what you were just saying, Natalie,
Yeah.
and a bunch of other stuff. But once they saw the 40% breakdown, it was like, oh, okay. Plus there's the capital issues for technology and all the other things that we go through. It's, you know, if we had 2 or 3 years to really plan really well for this, you know, you would iron those costs out, to Heather's point, a lot more meticulously, and say, oh, $110,000 for bulletproof vests, $50,000 for tasers, $300,000 for curriculum. You know, you'd be able to itemize it out a little bit. But the germane point is, for FY25, that's not the case. This is only for 26 and beyond. And the pledge has in item 10, which most people probably don't get to the end, this isn't like set in stone for the rest of eternity. This isn't, you know, a constitutional law here. I mean, it's just a framework to try to give the taxpayers some idea of where their money's going and how it's going to go about. I'm fully expecting by the time we get to FY26 or 27, a lot of this stuff is some of these things are going to change a little bit. I mean, it's just the nature of budgeting in these kind of times.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
George, Chana's on.
Chana has her
Chana
hand
has
up.
a
Chana.
question.
I do, yes, thank you. It's not so much a question, but more of a comment on the pledge document. The language in part 6D, where it says, the parties pledge to begin to establish new expectations on spending to ensure the town is able to live within its means to the end of the decade. Just a thought to maybe consider like the language in that part of the pledge, because listening to some of the public comments that were made during, I think, the joint town council school committee meeting, some people, when they heard that phrase that was used a few times, trying to like have Franklin live within its means, I think some people took that as like Franklin has been living lavishly, which I don't think is the case. So just if this is going to be shared widely with people, the language in that particular sentence might, some people might think it's, take it as like Franklin has been spending like way more than they should have been, and that's what got us into a budget issue, but I don't think that's the case. Just something to consider.
Thanks, Shanna.
I think
Well,
she's referring
I mean-
to 6D.
6B, yes.
Well, I think there's a lot of different opinions about that. There are a fair amount of people in town who do believe that maybe we've been spending a little bit too much. And I think that's the difficulty with these types of questions. Is, overrides, just that word, usually brings out a lot of very passionate opinions. And if you're a certain segment of the public, you maybe feel like there has been too much spending going on. The phrase, Chana, I agree, I think some people have maybe gone a little off the side with that. It's not about, and again, even interpretations are going to be opinions, but just so I'm clear, the intent of that statement was not about acknowledging that we've been living lavishly or spending too much or not. It was really about trying to, again, set that expectation with the taxpayer that water rates have gone up, sewer rates have been going through the roof, stormwater's been going up, trash and recycling's going up. We're gonna hit with a PFAS payment. You know, we're talking about overrides. You know, I think with inflation and everything going on with interest rates and mortgage rates and the housing market, in daily goods and services, I think people are feeling a little overwhelmed. Not everyone, but some people are feeling a little overwhelmed, and it was just kind of a metaphorical statement to just say, you know, the town at some point needs to kind of land the plane. Otherwise, you're gonna go out and keep on doing overrides every couple of years in this magnitude to pay for stuff that, you know, isn't necessarily lavish, but, you know, the citizens have to make a decision about whether or not they want to continually raise taxes for sidewalks, more roads, sustainability initiatives, net zero initiatives, and so forth and so on. So it was really just it wasn't meant to be, you know, widely kind of mistermed, Chana. It was just really something to say at some point we need to start living within our means, and start living within the 2.5% property, Proposition 2.5 levy.
I totally get that, but I think some people, like you said, just interpret it a little differently.
Oh, yeah.
But even just saying something like living within our available revenues might have, I don't know, maybe not be construed as
Yeah.
like Franklin living lavishly.
Yep, you could use one-time, or you could use within revenues.
I think that almost goes into what we were talking about, begin to establish new expectations on spending, which would be like a plan, a
Right.
financial plan.
I'm just gonna be clear.
Set that
like,
you know,
the
like,
superintendent in my entire 9 years here had never had a financial plan until Lucas presented one this March. The schools have never had a financial plan ever. That's not me being critical, it's not me being harsh. It's just a fact. And until Lucas and Bob really presented 4 doors this spring, we've been waiting a long time to find out, because at the end of the day, for every $10 in the tax base, 7 of those 10 go to public education. So until you have a plan from your school department, as well as your other schools in our case, because we have 3 of them that we send students to, until you really have a long-range plan from your school department, there's no option to have a long-range plan, because you can only do so much, because the schools are the center of your community. So until March of this year, I had never seen anything of level service plus restoration, Thrive. I think what the superintendent has done is amazing. In the last couple of years, he's been able to package a few issues that have been lingering out there for a long time. 1, what do we need in our schools to get up to the place we want to be? 2, you know, what's the future of redistricting and consolidation or non-consolidation of schools? And he's been able to get a lot of that done, and I think, you know, in a very short amount of time. So, as I say in here in the pledge, you know, moving forward, my expectation is that collaboration and that long-range planning will continue to get better. And as I said in the slideshow on Wednesday with the superintendent, you know, whether an override goes through or not, you know, our plan is this summer and fall is to really make sure that we start doing a lot better job of all that stuff. But unfortunately, up until this March, there's not much I could do.
Anybody else? I assume you want to vote on this? Yes?
Sure.
Okay, can you come up with a-
So let's see, a motion to approve the override pledge as presented.
Motion,
Second.
second.
Discussion.
Hey, Nicole, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear
Okay.
me? George, just real quick before I do the roll call,
Okay.
who's not there? Is John there and Michael? I didn't see them
Mike
yet.
is here.
John is not.
John is
John
here.
is not. All right. I had to update my list before I went. Okay. All right. George,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yes.
Heather,
yes,
William,
Yes.
Chana,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
and Nicole is yes.
All right, do you want to, in the interest of time, do you want to go through the slides or not? I think everybody's read them.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna go
You
through it.
presented them, and I don't see any
It's on
reason.
YouTube.
I really don't see any reason to go through that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do you have it memorized?
Kind of.
Yeah.
I just,
Dessert is waiting me at home, so let's,
Oh,
we gotta get moving.
Can I just ask a clarifying, so
laptop's not coming
you
up.
really truly never received a school superintendent budget, like the school budget, 70% of all funds? I'm just finding
No.
it fascinating that, you know, there was never a detailed school budget really up until Lucas,
no, I wanted a long-range plan.
a long-range plan.
Like some sort of vision of like
Like after
what are
this
the
year.
options here and
Yeah.
where's the public supposed to aim at? What's the number we're supposed to aim at to get to the
Like
goal of
level,
whatever the
yeah.
school district's goal is in educating children? How much money is it to get
So
there?
there were
What
just
does that
budgets
cost?
that just added
Yeah.
2%,
They've always
added
done it-
3%, or,
no,
yeah.
they've done
Like
a
basic budgeting.
Basic budgeting, and they've basically balanced their budget for years on
Yeah.
the backs of declining enrollment,
Yeah.
is what's happened.
Right,
And so they've done a fantastic job
Yeah.
managing their budget for years.
yeah.
It just wasn't like, where do we need to
Like,
be?
and no
because-
long-term planning,
Exactly,
and, okay,
exactly.
okay, that's helpful, thank you.
I don't think they could.
I'm glad you asked that,
Yeah.
Lauren. 'cause I
Yeah,
didn't
no, I just
wanna-
wanted, because I'm new to the finance
Yep.
committee too, I just want to make sure I was really understanding.
FPS,
That should be celebrated,
FPS.
that it now
I-
exists, you know.
Within 2 years of his leadership, it really is remarkable.
Yeah.
And the school business administrator too, a lot of credit to Bob and the whole team.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work, for sure.
I almost had to call Tim, my laptop would not connect, but Natalie got it connected. Do we want to go through each line item? I would like to.
I think you
Start
gotta
at
go through at least
121.
every account.
Yep.
So
Most of them,
start at the top.
having been through it today, is not.
We know the folks in the 600s are stuck here all night. I'm very sorry, but, you know, but just go one, right in order.
All right, town council. $7,000. Any questions on the council?
These are, sorry,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
slides are in this,
It's literally the budget. It's literally the budget.
the budget book.
Yep.
All right.
Horizontal one.
underneath
Yep.
it, so I can also
Yep.
just look down and be
Yep.
more comfortable, yeah. So, we're starting at the beginning, yeah?
So no issues with the council? No questions?
No.
Audie, well, then, this, Max questions? No? Okay. He's the only one out there. TA.
Right, yeah.
Here we go. I like that.
You wanna run through that, or, no?
I mean, most of the expenses in here are staff. I'm very grateful to have Amy on board. For those that have been asking, who else has assistant town managers? Town of Medway does, Town of Norfolk does, Town of Rentham does, Town of Millis, with their whopping population of 7,500 people, they have an assistant town manager. You know, it's not just the big towns, it's also the smaller communities. And so we're very grateful for the support to be able to have that in here. Most of the rest of the expense money is really relating to professional development, relating to dues and conferences for the Mass Municipal Association that Amy and I are both members of, as well as the conference fees for things like Women Leading Government and other Maya-related trainings for our insurance program that Julie and Jared go to. We're a staff of 4 people. So, and if you look at comparables to our size communities like the Needhams and some of those larger communities, they probably have 6 people, 7 people in an office our size.
I looked at Needham today. They actually have 8 in the town administrator's office.
So they have double.
They have budget analysts, they have lots of stuff.
Right.
A
And
lot more money.
I appreciate that, George, and it's just to like have, you know, new members and stuff, like, that's where the tax levy problem is. Needham's tax levy is probably 20 to 25% higher than Franklin's, because their land values are exorbitantly higher. And but that's why they're able to spend money on budget analysts and capital planning analysts, and I think they have 2 assistant town managers, if I'm correct. I think they've got 2.
I didn't see 2. I didn't see 2, but I'll.
Maybe 3,
Do they
but,
have the same population?
but I just, yeah,
Oh, it is.
yeah, it's just about the same, about 33,
It's a
34,
good
35,000.
comparison.
They're just a little more affluent than we are. We'll be there someday, Heather. In about 5 or 10 years, we'll be Needham, but that's. a
Their
little
budget
further
was
down.
1.1 million, just so you
The
know.
town manager?
The,
Wow.
town manager's budget was, from memory, about 1.1 million.
That's about right. That would make, this would make our budget within our levy pretty commensurate.
Is there fringe in this? Like, is this like, include fringe, I know you said it's mostly personnel, is it, this is salaries along with health and,
All of that is in the benefits
That's in the
budget down in
benefits
the
budget.
7,900s,
Okay,
yeah. We'll
okay.
get to that later on.
okay, yep, that's fine.
So about, can we ask questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Go for it.
So, as we're talking about overrides and expenses and things like that, I know you did a compensation, analysis in January, but that was last year or this year?
We did it in 2022 and we presented it publicly in 23,
23,
early
right?
23.
Heather, just
Right,
one
so-
thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, not
That's
here,
it.
the mic.
There you go.
Sorry.
I didn't want Steve.
I'm moving, I'm not in a great, this is a bad seat. So, what was I gonna say? Yeah, you did the comp analysis study, and so, I guess given this, and I'm assuming there's contracts or something involved, and that's why you see various increases, and you see it throughout, various increases in year over year, and those aren't public, that unlike some are and some aren't. So I think when you hear about various increases in compensation, with that compensation analysis study, is there a plan to kind of, I don't know, use it to rein it in a way,
Yeah.
or as a way that you, because not everybody should be above mid.
Right.
Mid is okay.
Right.
And so I don't know, I'm just kind of, this is when it comes to salaries and whatnot, it feels like this is the one of the wiggle rooms in a budget.
Right.
It's not really, but it feels like it is because it's not mandated,
Sure.
it's like it's not a law. So you can decide how many personnel you want. You could hire 10 if you wanted, but then we'd be double. So there's that. So this is where a lot of questions that I'm getting
Sure.
are coming from, trying to figure out what is the strategy around the compensation when it's not under a union.
Right, so if folks go on the Human Resources website, the comp plan is right there. It's 100 and something pages, people can read the whole study. That was the first plan that was ever done by the town ever.
It was interesting, it didn't compare to many of the towns that we normally hear Franklin compared to, like, it had like towns like Milford or something.
Yeah.
It didn't have Wellesley or any of that, so.
Right. We are definitely
It
not
was
Wellesley.
good that, we are not,
No,
but
we
you
are
hear
far
it
away
all the
from
time.
Wellesley.
It's odd that we're compared to that, I don't know why.
Well,
but
because we're all.
anyways, that's a different story, so, yeah, to carry on with
These
the
are all great
comp
questions.
plan.
No, so we don't just compare ourselves to everybody who's 35,000 people, because
No.
no one's gonna take a job and drive from Newburyport to here. So if you read the study, which again, I understand it's like long and it's tough, but it does about a 30-mile circumference around Franklin as to generally where people will commute. Now, there are people behind me or whatever that travel an hour plus to get here. There are exceptions to all those rules, but you try to look within a certain set of assumptions, right?
Yeah.
Assumptions are just assumptions in the model. It's not necessarily the case all the time, right? So people can have to take it as those are the assumptions that are built into the model. We built a good baseline of what was market. My irritability with comp and class plans has always been that employees are paid, and we did find this during the study, out of class, right? Well, what difference, if I gotta hire a police chief, and somebody over here is making $200,000 a year, but they're being paid $25,000 out of class, what good is that gonna do me? So we wanted a comp and class study that actually reflected actual salaries. And if you actually go in and look at some other comparables, our numbers match up really, really well with a lot of those communities. In terms of reining it in, you know, just like the schools would say, I think for their staff, our community is only as good and as powerful as the people that we have in place to do it. So for the people behind me and that are listening at home, even those that are in unions, or it doesn't matter whether you're in union or not in union, there are still comparables out there that you try to do. The schools talk about this all the time relative to teacher retention ratios, right? I think what people really are just upset about is that some people were heavily underpaid for a long time. And what we did was, and we presented this at the Finance Committee meeting in 2023, our first priority in the comp study were actually the lowest grades and the highest grades. Why? Because I know this may be a shock, but there's a lot fewer people that want to be the boss than ever before. So fewer and fewer people want to be the chief. Fewer and fewer people want to be the department head. Fewer and fewer people want to be a superintendent or town manager. And so those positions are becoming more valuable. The town of Hopkinton just posted its town manager at a range of 210 to 250. And they still may not get somebody that they can fill in that job. And then we also, as part of that first round of the compensation plan, wanted to mostly focus on the folks that were in the lowest grades of that. And we did have a goal. You can't do it all in one swoop, but our goal was always to try to get people to the midpoints, right? Because that's really where it's aimed at. I agree, not every single employee. Maybe some person was here for 30 years, was making a little too much. You don't cut their salary, right? Right.
No,
So
right.
so some of it's just, I'm just trying to like,
I
I
just
mean, you
think-
asked a pretty in-depth question, so I
Yeah.
gotta give an in-depth answer.
Yeah.
So you want to try over time, in the goal over the next 5 years, say, maybe 3 more years, right? Because we're already 2 years into it, is to try to get to a place where those positions are at the mid-levels and are not creeping too much up. Don't forget, when somebody retires and they're at the top possible level of a grade, maybe when you fill that position with somebody that's new, maybe they go at the mid-level, right? It just depends on the position. I hope that gives that's like a 5-minute
I understand this.
over-
I can speak this all day, but I
Oh, you
know a
can?
lot of other people can't. So that I think that did help.
Okay.
I do, because that's when you partner this or pair this with, we need to do an override. People say, well, why do people make so much money? You know, that's one
Well-
of the first things. But valid. They're doing a job and they're performing and they're, these are the ranges that we have and we're set at certain places. And to your point, the longevity piece is something else, so that you can be way out of your range because you've been doing something for 25 years. And it happens. So I'm guessing that's happened throughout here, throughout this whole budget, and especially in a municipal, you have some long-term employees, so
Right.
you tend to see that. So
I'm just trying to make the trains run on time and pay people that are doing incredible work to the highest level I can. Look, there's no perfect science to this. This is not making widgets in some private sector company where you can kind of see the marketplace and figure it out pretty easy where your competitors are. It's just tough. And I think part of it that gets hard is there are people that get singled out in this. It becomes very uncomfortable to talk about publicly about certain people. This is one of the reasons why local government is not appealing to a lot of people as a career choice, because they get bashed on Facebook, they get made fun of, people say they're overpaid, they're underpaid. This is part of the public sector ether of the 2020s, and it's very hard. And that's why I've always said to people, if people have a question regarding a salaried employee or where the market is or why that person's situation the way it is, all they have to do is pick up the phone and give me a call. They can call the human resources director. We can walk through the decision making and maybe what the unique factors were on that particular instance. It's really, really challenging, Heather, as you alluded to, to just talk about it all in public about every salary. I can tell you, as I'm sitting here today, really there is no salary that I'm aware of that is egregiously paid to somebody that doesn't deserve it or that's way out of market. if people don't like my salary, for example, and I'm just the boss, so I'll take the hit, I get it. But when Hopkins is gonna pay $250, okay, and then the next town next year in Andover is gonna pay $260, or the town of Acton's making $270, you know, like, I hate to break the news, it's a lot of money, don't
Well,
get
I
me wrong, and I work hard for it. I'm just saying on behalf of every other employee behind me and folks watching at home, like, they have places they can go take a job to too, just like a teacher, a cop, a fireman, or union employee.
I think knowing that these numbers are not only tied to performance, but obviously to a compensation plan that is actively in place and followed is
Yeah.
helpful. I think that some people just
Really?
think numbers come out of the, well, you're gonna get 85 and you're gonna get 200. Like, you know, it
I
just,
agree.
you
I
know,
agree.
people may not understand that when you don't do that every day, or you're not familiar with it, which, you know,
Yeah,
I'm not a mechanic, so I can't do things in my car, but I bring them to the people that can. So it's,
it's all right on the HR website,
Yeah.
both the actual grade
So I think
classification and the
Yeah.
study that was done 2 years ago, and people can, you know. And we do update the class plan every July 1 now, times 2.5% to stay up with market. So if that changes in the
the
future.
COLA part is
Yeah.
what you're saying for
Right, the
that.
COLA
Yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah.
But if we went into a recession and people were getting zeros, we would also update that to reflect zero.
Negative, yeah.
You know, maybe that's helpful to some people too, to know it does come down as well, right? There are years where that plan goes into effect a year later and it's zero.
Thank you, Jamie, I appreciate it, sorry to
Sure.
take up the time.
What he just said got me thinking, so the comp plan on our website right now is the FY24 plan. So if you're looking at the FY25 budget, everything on there is gonna have a 2.5%. So the numbers might look a little bit out of whack, because that entire plan, each grade's gonna go up by 2.5% on July 1st.
Oh, I got you.
So just to kind of conceptualize
Yes,
what,
got it.
you're
Yep.
comparing 25
I
to the
thought so, I just-
FY24
yeah,
comp plan.
Make sure I got it.
So I have a draft that will be published at the beginning of the year, but just to kind of, anything on that plan, increase the minimum and the max by 2.5%.
We just, in order to put
Karen,
that
I'm
out,
the HR director.
in order to put that out, we need the budget approved.
Yeah.
Which,
Okay,
so,
we'll get there.
yeah, I know, exactly.
Anything else? We good,
We might have, I'm good. I don't know.
No. guys? No? Okay, moving right along.
I had something.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry, Max, I saw you.
No, Max Marangelo, 127 Central Park Terrace. No, I just going off of those points, I think that entire conversation needed some context to people who might be at home and might not understand how that relates to public discourse. I didn't know if, sort of tactfully and clearly yet tactfully that can be made to people at home what the comp plan is and how it relates to the budget. The other thing is I was curious as to, this is real softball, but when someone has, a year or two of experience under their belts, in Franklin specifically, how much value does that add to an employee?
That's a great question. I mean, it depends on the job. I mean, if I'll give an example, like our food inspection staff member who does all of our inspections, Jeannie McNeil, enormous amount of value, right? I value institutional knowledge. I think in a lot of cases it does help, but it's not the only factor. Just depends on the job. Some union positions, I would say the same thing, like the water department, sewer department. 30 years of experience down there, you know the whole town where every manhole is, and you can probably be a little more effective at your job. But
Okay, moving right along, FinCom, any issues? I have a question, and I'm sure Nicole would like this question. Can we at some point, as part of that, our whopping $1,500 budget, come up with somebody to take notes on these meetings? They can get, if they're gonna be done properly, there's a lot of data that comes out. And they don't have to be sitting here, they can do it on TV or tomorrow from the recordings. But if you could put that in your, see, Amy's making notes.
that's why I need a deputy town administrator. You just thank you.
To be a note taker?
Come on, Heather.
I know she runs the Zoom too, so
She
there's a lot
follows
going on
up.
over
She
there.
gets, I mean, there's a lot that she does Zoom too.
Oh, God. Finance committee, all set. Comptroller.
Yep. I mean, really, what you have here are the main drivers of the staff, and then the $58,000 number that's in there is for the annual audit. Everything else is basic, is just, you know, basic stuff. But the main piece in the expense item is really the audit at $60,000.
I have a question on the audits, and I think I've asked it before, I don't remember the answer. Does,
He's always there with the laptop and
yeah, are the schools' transactions audited as completely as the towns? That's, there's, I mean, 70% of the money goes to the schools in some form. It would be nice to know there was a pretty stringent audit on that.
It goes by dollar value, so how much percent of the budget, that's how much of the audit they get.
They do, all right. It's not, because it doesn't show in their budget, it's a town budget, right?
It's the whole budget, that's correct.
But I don't remember saying much, I listened to the audit.
I know you've asked that question a lot of years, George.
Yeah.
I'm finally answering it for you. Yes, they get audited, they get audited as much as we do, as much as the other town departments, let me put it that way.
That was just my concern. An old banker always asks about auditors. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other,
Do you charge that out to the schools, the percentage that goes to?
percentage of that would be, yeah. It's what the, well, go ahead, Chris.
We allocate it through the end of the year report, and it goes into the cost per pupil report. It's actually allocated that way.
Yeah.
But no, the town pays for all of it, except
right.
the end of the year report is something called agreed upon procedures. That the end of the year report is something that they submit to DESE each year that tells not only how much they spent on each student, but how much the town spent on each student.
Okay.
is that reflected in the $17,000 number or whatever it is?
Yes, and I heard a comment in another meeting where somebody said, well, how come we don't include certain costs when we're figuring costs per student? We do. There's a formula, there's actually an agreement that's signed by both Jamie and the superintendent each year.
What about the major capital, the high school net,
Debt services included.
okay?
Mhm.
That makes more sense to me.
That's why the per pupil, school business administrator said, I think, one of the last meetings, when they saw, I think it was on the April 24th meeting, he had a per pupil cost up there of 16,000 and change. That was literally just the per pupil in their account. That did not include the additional money that Chris is referencing in the net school spending report at the end of the year. I got a lot of questions. Why was the per pupil different than what we normally hear, which is like 19,000, 18,000 and change or whatever it is now? And he deducted the municipal portion from that number.
Anything else, sir?
I have a question on this. How many heads were in the FY '23 versus FY '24?
Probably, good question.
What was the question?
How many
How
The
many
heads?
heads?
head count difference. Obviously, there were additional heads added.
There's
I
a,
would
Yeah.
say 2 additional, I think, Lauren.
Okay.
The munis administrator and well, there's 2 things. One, the munis administrator and the budget and fiscal analyst, but also the town absorbed in a school employee, Cheryl Connell at the bottom, as part of the reorg, which we'll present in June with the town and school HR and finance offices. We decided to put payroll into one department so that all school and town payroll were being done as efficiently as possible. And so one employee that was on the school's books this year is now coming off and going into this budget.
Okay.
Are the vacants new or just vacant?
The vacants are in the current FY24 budget. We have put out the munis administrator twice and have not been able to find a candidate. And I think basically the price point is the problem. And number 2, the budget and fiscal analyst closed a few weeks ago and we just haven't gotten to do the interviews yet. And then the vacant is a special assistant. As everybody probably knows, Chris is retiring this year. And so we're gonna have a new chief financial officer. And that will ultimately be Chris, who's agreed, like Mr. Dutch, to spend on an additional 6 months or a year trying to just make sure there's a smooth transition.
Yeah, is that budgeted for, the
Yep.
CFO?
It's called vacant right now, but that's because Chris still has a job. He's up top on the finance director.
You want to commute from Hudson still? Come on.
It's Upton.
Upton?
Yeah.
Oh, that's closer.
I thought it was like posted for like 185 or 195.
That was the chief financial officer.
That's what I'm
Another,
thinking.
another urban myth that I've been getting the last several days. The budgeted fiscal analyst is a totally different job than the finance
Right,
director.
is the CFO, is that
Can I just
here?
clarify?
Yeah, thank you.
Chris's position's listed as a special assistant. So that,
No, they're not asking about that. They're asking about the finance director.
okay, but that's where Chris is still listed as the CFO, and then the special assistant is after we hire the CFO. Chris would be part-time as the special assistant.
Right.
Oh, so they just,
that's-
it's just the
Yeah.
classification.
Yep.
I understand. So
But the posting reference
Basically,
that you made,
the
Heather,
new-
is
yeah.
the chief financial officer
Right.
position.
the new CFO will be.
Which is
where it says
replacing Chris.
Christopher, and vacant
Oh,
will be
I
where
see
Chris
now.
goes as
Yes.
the special assistant
Sorry
to
that I
stay
have to
on.
keep
Yeah,
explaining.
no,
No, those are great questions because I think, no, Heather, you're on the pulse because these are the
Oh,
same
I
emails.
am, Jamie, I've read it all.
These are the same questions I'm getting shot at me on email every day. So I think they're really good to go through. And I know it's a little, once a budget's approved and we hire a CFO, we'll change the names all around. But some of that's just gonna be in live.
So I hope you're gonna be part-time or
Yes,
Yeah.
get to the coast at some point and
yes.
I'm sorry?
enjoy the coast or something at some point.
Golf course.
Golf, of course, of
Golf.
course. Good, good.
That kind of course.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, that makes sense.
Anything else on, wherever we at, controller? Thank you, guys. What's next?
Board of Assessors.
Board of Assessors,
Steady as she goes.
I was gonna say, my notes here are a dash. I didn't have any questions on that. Treasurer Collector, I didn't have questions. Anybody else? No? Legal, what's there to ask?
Mark's opinion.
Yeah. We're gonna get
It
him-
is a collective bargaining year, just so folks know, so that's why there was an additional 10,000 put in legal expenses. But still,
Is-
knock on wood,
Is 10 gonna cover it?
well, knock on wood, we haven't had to really have a lawyer in-house for collective bargaining at all. Most towns and the schools have lawyers with them everywhere. Karen and I generally do all the work, and we just have really good labor relations, so we hope that we don't need that at all. But usually Karen might call Labor Council a couple times just about some new ideas that might come on the table, but usually we're in pretty good shape.
Anything else? No? HR, I have two questions. Do we have the software yet? No, huh? I asked, probably third or fourth year now.
Well,
Yeah, it's,
We've talked quite a bit about new technology for human resources. We were looking at one product that dragged their feet on some procurement issues. So we ended up switching products, and now we're looking at it, big picture of a lot of different stuff we can do with potentially expanding Munis, is our payroll system, but expanding some of the products that they offer. So our director of technology is working on that, in addition to 2 major website upgrades and a lot of other stuff. So it's been kind of pushed back, but we're finally making some progress and hopefully should be going through it definitely this fiscal year.
Sorry, you have a director of technology under human resources?
The director of technology is helping us with implementing the technology.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
got you.
So
Got you.
it's,
I
at
was
this
like,
point, we
that's
kind of
fancy.
reviewed, and then it's off to him to talk about how
Okay.
the system works and getting his staff on board and making sure everything lines up correctly.
Got it.
the issue is not going to be the software or anything, it's going to be getting the old stuff in.
Correct.
it's gonna be
Depending on how far
bandwidth.
back you
I'm
wanna
gonna come
go.
back to bandwidth. It's about bodies to do the work.
Yeah, exactly, that's intensive, that one.
Very intensive, because those are also school-related personnel files as well. So that's another area of collaboration that we definitely have had on the second floor, which has been great.
I'm personally glad to see that the like jobs are migrating together. That just makes unbelievable sense.
It does.
They're a little bit different, there's nuances in the schools, as there is in the town, but the new finance director ought to be able to figure that out.
Yep.
Just-
Agreed. And school business
Personal
administrator
opinion.
too. We have a new school business administrator coming as well.
Yes.
So both of the department heads will change over, which is
I had a meeting with the temporary one,
yeah.
that was an adventure, I'll tell you. He had some interesting,
He's incredibly smart. Yeah.
yes, he is.
Very good at what he does.
We were really
Question on
lucky.
HR.
Yep.
It looks like it's just +1. Is that the administrative assistant?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
just confirming. Which makes sense, given bandwidth issues.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm being.
It was actually, yeah, go ahead, my bad. All set.
No, I'm behind, that's,
IT?
okay. Anything else? Oh, IT. Questions, guys?
For Tim?
The next slide.
Sure.
Right, because most of Tim's budget is in the schools, correct?
So the main
The
feature here on the
cyber guys.
administrative personnel is in FY '24 and before that, we had hired a cybersecurity specialist that was jointly between the town and the schools. And last year, in the mid-year, we were unable to hire anybody at the salary level that was at. Obviously, given the financial challenges before the schools, they were unable to really raise that up. So we're trying this year to see if it's just in the town side, if somehow we might be able to get a better bite at the apple. It's unclear whether that salary request is going to be able to get the candidate that we want. And if we don't, then Tim will look at Plan B, whether there's some sort of outside service that could somehow do some of the work. Also, the Munis administrator in the other position is really also a security position. Munis, by the way, for all of those who don't know, is our financial module accounting and HR software by the town and schools. All of us use it. And that's really the center of it all. So that's really the big cost driver here. And then the typical stuff, Tim can answer some questions if folks have them, is just on general increases to a lot of the licenses. And just so folks know, this is what's, the stuff that's in Tim's budget, the tech budget on the municipal side is for municipal expenses. The schools, I believe, have a technology budget within the school budget that pay for the rest of Tim's staff, all the other hardware, licensing and stuff that goes along with the school department.
Anything else on IT?
What's the, besides Munis, what are the other maintenance contracts that you carry? Or the significant ones at least, because I imagine the list. Because obviously there was a big jump, and I don't know if it was all Munis from '23 to '24, now it's pretty much steadied. But I just wonder if there's like a couple of huge players and then a bunch of littles, or?
Tim Raposa, Director of Technology for the town and schools. So to give an idea overall, just the licensing in that budget is $435,000. That's how many different licenses we have. So I typically budget for a 5% increase year to year. You'd never know until they give you the quote in usually June, July. So that's the other, I'd say the biggest one is Google licenses. Those are $144 per user. That increased to 240 this year, 144 to 240. That was the biggest driver increase. So it went from 41,000 in FY24 to 68,000. And the way Google licenses work is when someone does leave, you suspend that user, but in order to keep that user, you still have to pay, as long as you want to have access to that user's archive. I believe it's $18, archive licenses, Google Archive license. Yeah, that increased. Yeah, that one didn't increase too much. But basically, for everyone who's left, we're paying roughly $10,000 a year at this point for everyone who's left, just to maintain access to that user data, so that accounts don't go away. So that'll grow and grow and grow. And I'm guessing 7 years is when we do the cutoff. But right now, we're still within those first 7 years. So.
Okay. helpful, thank you.
Any other questions on IT?
Oh,
All right.
I have a crazy question. When Heather and I went to the Finance Committee in Sharon, or wherever it was
Yeah,
last year,
community center?
You
Yeah.
did, yeah.
there was
Great
a
day.
discussion that at least I participated in about email addresses and the potential. This committee does not have town email addresses. Everyone else does. And I don't know, there was an issue of God, I can't remember what the issue was. A subpoena to get
Yeah, public record.
information. They would get my home email.
They would.
That doesn't seem quite right, but I don't know. I just bring it up for somebody to think about, I guess.
We have thought about it. We just expanded a couple years ago to the elected officials. And what we need to do now is get into the appointed boards, which is, you know, like 15 additional boards. So if you start with one, then you got to keep figuring out what the game plan is. And so Amy and I have been trying to talk about like what boards would get a full email, probably like Finance Committee. But then when I worked in Hopkinton, like the Cultural Council, for example, had one email, and the chair had access to Google Drive and could set permissions. So when the chair rotates, you can just change the permissions in Google Drive to whatever, and it's a bandwidth thing that's been on the plate for us to talk to Tim about expanding out to another level, but we just haven't, you know, I know something like that seems easy, maybe to somebody listening at home, but it takes a lot of work to coordinate with 15 boards and committees, like the Conservation Commission, and do they want them all? And come to find out, as you would not be shocked, not everybody wants a town email account.
I understand, but I'm more interested if I get a subpoena for my emails and they're gonna.
There
read
was a
it.
case
Good
that
God.
Wanna
that
see.
happened to a mayor many years ago, and he did pass away, so rest in peace. But he did go through the entire court process, and all of his personal emails are sitting in the city clerk's office in that one municipality.
And I just wanted to add something to that as well, is those archive licenses I told you about. So with the rotation of people through boards and committees, every single person that I give an email to address on the town side, now we pay for the next 7 years to keep that archive, even when they go. So if they're here for 6 months or a year or
Pay
4 years.
a lot more if I gave you a bill to retrieve mine.
Right.
You know, so there's a.
Right.
Yeah,
there's a-
yeah, and yeah, we get that. I was just saying that there is a cost associated with it on the town side. On the school side, we can get away with it because Google for Education we can get away with a lot of free licenses because that's how Google works. But on the town side, we pay just like any business.
We've all got masters in ed,
Hmm.
so. don't
Especially after this process.
No.
Are we done with Tim? Yes. Town clerk, elections, which is a hot topic, seeing as we're gonna pay 30.
Just
30
as
grand.
as I say all the time, this is, you know, obviously, there's a couple big elections coming up in FY25, but more so when we look at staffing levels, you know, just for all the people out there that don't know these things, most of these departments you're gonna see have 1, 2, or 3 people. There's only 3 people in the clerk's office that are paid full-time. You know, and all the other folks are there for election workers, so. There's really not a lot of extra money in most areas of this budget.
Questions on the elections, town clerk? No? Okay. Conservation Commission, Bill? You want to opine on that?
So folks will see in here, this is a brand new, this is actually a brand new budget. The Conservation Department still works under the Department of Planning, but with our first and still only full-time staff member in the department, Bricolai, you know, we're trying to elevate conservation with all the open space, and in the long run, here's a long-range issue for you, Heather. I mean, in the next 5 years, you know, this is a budget where there may be more initiatives baked into it. I don't see any huge cost adjustments going in, but, you know, this is basically, we're just carving out conservation into its own budget to get a little bit more high-profile nature. The rest of the money is the same as it was last year, except for a few extra $1,000 for professional development for Bricolai.
Questions? Concom?
Actually, if and when the, sustainability person
Yep.
gets added,
Great question.
does that get lumped in here? Where does that go?
That's a very good question. To be decided, originally it was in the facilities budget. Because most of what you're dealing with fleet and buildings and the things that the grants that the folks talked about before, a lot of that money that is out there is really for infrastructure and buildings and fleet and stuff like that. But we'll see, to be determined.
ZBA. I don't see any members of the ZBA. That's pretty clear, although they do collect huge fees. I've seen some of the fees.
I always joke, Kevin Doyle and Gus Brown are people's two best friends in this town. They're the ones that are bringing in the money.
Questions,
If
ZBA?
we transferred all the building fees into Gus's staff, he would have a Taj Mahal.
He's standing up.
I know, he is. Look at us.
Gus, I just want to thank you for approving my deck. I appreciate that. It's lovely. On a day like today.
Oh, well, yeah, we've been here too long already.
You got a long way to go.
I know. Planning and growth.
Yep.
Well, I'm sorry, I skipped the Ag Commission. Why, I don't know. Was it $1,000 or something? That's the Ag Commission is new,
4 or 5 years old.
is it really?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm losing track of time too.
Yeah, I'm keeping track of a lot.
I'm like
of
trying to
things,
think, was it
Jamie.
pre-pandemic or post? I can't even, I think it was pre, right? Yeah. It was 2018, maybe 6 years now, George, 6 years.
Oh.
6 or 7 years, yeah.
Planning and growth? Any
Yeah, the
questions?
real big change here is just simply 7, just for the record. Planning and growth is the community development office, and really the big change here is just removing the one conservation salary and moving it into its own department.
Max is up then. No questions on planning? Ag Commission, I had that out of order on my list, yeah.
Yep.
We did that.
Facilities?
Public property.
I believe, just so you know, unfortunately Mike is unable to make it. He was ill, but Kevin's here somewhere. Come on up, Kev. Kevin Harn, the Deputy Director for Facilities.
Yep.
Well, we got some deputies there now, which is relatively new, right?
Yes.
A year and a half, Kev?
Well, a little over a year.
A little over a year? Yeah.
Yeah. I have one question. We can talk about the schools. Do we know what percentage of what Mike spends in percentage or in dollars? I don't really care, for the school side. Just, because I get asked that question.
That's actually a Chris Sandini question, and while he's walking up to
Well,
answer a
he's
little bit more,
sitting-
you're looking at probably roughly 70 to 75% easy. Remember, we're 1.3 million square feet of public building, and the schools are 1 million of that 1.3. So just across the board, right off the gate, your baseline's about 3/4. But in actuality, it's a lot higher than that. There's a reason why the museum cupola project has not gotten moving yet. The pavilion at the senior center is just the needs at the school facilities are so substantial that we need to focus our energies around that.
It's a large portion of the budget. It's a very
My
large,
two
large
questions
portion
were,
of the.
how many square feet in the schools and what percentage? That's,
Well, there you go.
there we go. That was my two questions. Because all the other stuff, we're all going through.
Right.
Electric rates are up, gas rates are up, everything. So his budget really has to follow.
Electric is down though.
Well,
How is
this-
electric down for the budget?
Probably just based on, Mike will do the calculations based off usage.
Okay.
Yeah, plus we get, he pays for refrigerators and all kinds of stuff out of the credits on.
Some of
this,
it's,
like
yeah,
you go.
it's net metering credits from, it's off budget, but it's net metering credits from the solar farm up on Union Street. Just a lot of different ways. I mean, that's a good example of how we were able to convert all of the lights to LED in all of the buildings, was basically for free from net metering credits from National Grid. So just an anecdotal thing.
Max?
Yes, Max Marangello, 127 Central Park Terrace. It's like muscle memory now. So I did talk to, sent an email to the FinCom and to Mr. Helen about the telephone line item. And it was expressed to me there was a lease for the physical telephones. It's a $200,000 line item. But I did, Mr. Helen referred me to a memo from 2018 with regards to that lease, and I looked it up, and he said it was a 10-year lease, but in retrospect, I was looking at it, it said it was a 5-year lease for the phones, and we were expected to keep the phones for another couple of years. And it looks like the cost of the landlines and the service was only about like less than $50,000, so I was curious if that line item can be broken down further, just so we know is as part of its cell phone, are there other line items in there other than landline and cell?
I'll ask Tim to come up to explain cell phones, because he does all the cell phone purchasing for the town and school for the professional phones. On the landlines, that account in the telephone, the 204,000 is for all the landlines in the DPW, you know, all the administrative offices. So the facility director isn't here to confirm this, but 5 years ago when we went into this lease, George, you might have been on the FinCom, I had said, why do we need landlines? Why don't we just get everybody a cell phone? And that was not the popular answer. And I think as time moves on, my guess is eventually people will probably just have cell phones at work, may not even have landlines. I don't know the future of that, but I don't know about eliminating the landlines. I know Max isn't recommending that necessarily.
Yeah, I was thinking like a voice over IP.
But, you know, we have voicemail to email. I mean, we have all that. I mean, we can look into it, but the problem is it's not going to save any money today or next week by the time the budget needs to be approved.
I assume we're using VoIP, yeah?
Yeah,
I mean, we got
we're
a
actually,
network that covers all the buildings.
yeah, working with technology, we work very, very closely with facilities for a lot of the stuff, the security, the doors, the cameras, everything, including the phone system. And the phone systems are all voice over IP. We're also using, basically our phone calls are going out over the internet. Not only do we have VoIP phones on our desk where we're leveraging our network so we don't have to use separate phone lines, we also are using, I forgot the 3-letter acronym for that one, but the internet, basically instead of having a bunch of lines from the phone company. SIP trunking? Yes. I think we're using SIP. I think that's what it is. Very good. But we're putting it out over the internet so that that alone was a $50,000 a year savings. Just doing that piece. So the pieces of the phone system that we have for the landline-based phones, that's why you go VoIP. Sometimes the call quality is not that great, but it's not as good as clean copper lines. You're dealing with the internet. But we've had pretty good luck with it. As far as the desktop phones go, and everyone having cell phones, a big part of that's keeping desktop phones is the E911 stuff. That's the problem, especially on the school side. If someone picks up a phone in a classroom, E911 tells that emergency personnel exactly where to go in the building. And that's why it's become law, and that's why you see that big increase for the phones, because that's very expensive. You can't get around it. You have to have it. With a cell phone, as you know, you call 911 on a cell phone, they try to find you. There's no pinpointing you exactly where you are. Not yet, anyway.
They get pretty close, but not.
Yeah, but when someone's not breathing, pretty close might mean life and death.
Really sucks.
Yeah, so. Any other cell phone questions?
And how do we purchase the town-issued cell phones?
Cell phones are all through Verizon. They have state contract. Pretty much, we don't even purchase phones for the most part, unless there's a need for anything more than the phone that we get for free from Verizon, and they give us a free phone every 1.5 years for every employee. I can upgrade anyone's phone for 1.5 years. Right now, they're iPhone 12s. We get iPhone 12s for free. We'll get you the email first, then you get the phone.
We're gonna get emails and cell
And
phones.
town-issued phones.
Okay. We're getting wacky. All right, that's all my questions on property. Gentlemen, ladies? Board of Health, I think. is
Oh, I
next.
thought that was separate. So the
It's
property,
way down the end.
property is also part of the facilities piece, right?
That is facilities.
So, and trying to, right, so at the bottom of page 52, I don't know what you have up there, but 52, you're adding totals from pages 2 and 3, but I don't understand where those tie to. What are pages 2 and 3, if you're on page 52? Page
I'm lost.
53.
So page 52 I have is the salary sheet.
Yeah, right. So at the bottom,
Yep.
totals from pages 2 and 3, is that just the two, well, there's
That's
like,
just the two salary sheets.
there's 3 salary sheets that I have.
Yep.
No, it's better online.
Yep.
Can shrink it down.
Yep, there's 3.
Okay, so is this 3.4 the total of these 3 sheets?
I would imagine so. I'm just
Yeah, on the first
ballparking it. It
page.
looks,
Heather, on the first
looks-
page, there's a little like subtotal, it says totals from pages 2 and 3, and then
Yeah.
it adds up
I
to
know, that's what I'm
3.4.
saying, but there's like 3 pages, so I wanted to make sure that they were all,
so
because this says
page,
1.27, this says 952, and then over here,
That gets into the 2.2, that gets added
okay,
onto the
and then
first
that's in the
page.
2.2.
Yeah.
Okay, so, George, maybe to your question, what percentage goes to the schools? These are all school
like everything.
related, yeah.
Yep.
So page 2 and 3 are full school, figures. But they're in here, so which, if I can bring it around, maybe
Sure.
is part of that 40%?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's part of the 500, it's part of the 500,000 in year 1.
And part of the
year
500,000?
Yeah.
Right.
So that 500,000 in year 1 of the override on 25 extends into 26, 27, 28, or else you have to cut those accounts.
So this
But
is,
you're exactly right. So that $500,000 and 25 that goes in perpetuity, plus just the Remington Jefferson and Horace Mann alone, just those 2 issues right there are 2/3 of that 40%.
and so
which is
2.2
schools.
million
Yes.
of the facilities budget is related directly to the schools, which is later on 40% of the override. Will
Not
go
sure I
towards
followed
this.
your math totally
I know,
there,
it might
but-
not be quite
but
right.
it's
It could
okay.
be an
But-
arrow
But you're
wrong
getting
there, but-
closer to the germane point, which is,
Okay.
of that 40%, a majority of that money is still going to school.
I just want to
It's
drive that
just
home that
not-
people understand that. It's still the school,
is-
but it looks,
It's gonna take
it's here.
a long time.
Yeah.
But tonight is a huge moment, again, to educate people on these
Yeah.
questions, which is totally spot on. When people say schools, it cannot be limited to just account 300.
right.
Right? And as we go through the budget, Heather, too, as you've gone through many times before, when we get to workers' comp, when we get to property and casualty, when we get to unemployment insurance, we get to a variety of other accounts, DPW, there's a lot of money in the municipal budget that pays for school-related stuff.
So George, it is actually pulled out in a way, first part of it,
Yeah,
like
it
to your
is, but
question
I
earlier,
just-
you know. In a way,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But you don't hear that in the conversation.
right, but it's here.
Oh, yeah?
So we
It's
have.
been here forever.
No, I know,
It's
yeah.
actually, this year is the 20th anniversary
Of,
of
oh,
the facilities
split of the-
department
when
getting
we-
moved from the
municipal-
schools to be jointly managed. Now, just for the public's edification on Facebook, if you wanted to split the two, you could then do what most towns do, which is hire 2 facilities directors, 2 tech directors,
Yeah.
2 deputy tech directors, 2 deputy facilities directors, and on and on and on and on. Then you're managing 2 different collective bargaining units. I mean, you could just keep going. And then, right? And so the reality is the town of Franklin is actually using its money as efficiently as probably any community in the state. When you think about the efficiencies that are brought in on just facilities, technology, just some of the bigger ones, certainly DPW as well, in terms of grounds and maintenance and all of that stuff, shoveling snow and ice removal, all of those things are all managed by people that are experts in those fields, right? And so that has provided a lot of savings structurally in the tax base over years. And I totally understand it doesn't get out there very much. So
No, and that's why
I'm hoping
just-
you can get that message out, Heather.
I can get on right now, you want? Jamie
Should be watching right now, all these folks.
I don't
right?
understand. Do we not have a Facebook live stream for some reason, or no? Just kidding.
I'm trying to get payroll done.
I know. Just kidding.
Okay, moving right along. Have we beaten that?
Facilities horse.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well,
Good job, Kevin.
All right,
good job.
never a question, good.
So, account net 196, purchasing central services is actually a merged department. Central services was already here, but we've taken out of the comptroller's budget the chief procurement officer, Pam Vickery, and made her department a department head level position. As the town grows, bandwidth, structure-wise, we're gonna be doing more and more, and I just wanna thank Pam for all of her hard work. Especially notably, she also helps the schools with 30B purchasing relative to food, common supplies, state bid lists. Pam also works with our school department on a lot of that stuff, so that's another administrative thing behind the scenes, just a small portion of her time.
And so the comptroller would charge that back to her
Exactly.
time back. Yeah.
Bingo, exactly.
Okay.
If it's 5% even.
It's hard to find that
Yep.
data, but it is there because that's what you're doing.
It
what you're
is,
doing.
and I said on a
So,
slide on Wednesday,
yeah.
that number fluctuates a lot every year,
Mhm.
right? It can, because capital is built into that too. So if the schools get $2 million in capital funding, that number goes way up, right?
Yeah.
So it does go, it can go lower as well. But this is a new department and, in some ways are a merger of two departments into one to manage those costs. Which is really basically, so you know, postage. It's almost all postage.
Human Services, Department 510, Board of Health. I have one question.
Yeah,
You
that is a
are
lot.
way
of
ahead of me.
postage.
Well, I'm
What are you
going by
mailing?
the agenda.
That's how bad you want to get that dessert, huh?
You better believe it. I have a question for, is Kathy Liberty here? Yeah, there you are. You read the health department. How many restaurants and food service establishments do we have in this town? That will get inspected by Ginny McNeil?
Well, I'm trying to think of my narrative. We have, I believe, approximately, I want to say about 130 food establishments, and we have probably 75 of your convenience stores.
So
We
it's
call them low risk.
200 round numbers.
Around that, yeah. And they're
So-
inspected
And that's done by
twice a
one
year.
person?
No, it's not. So we have Ginny, who traditionally in the past has done them all the time. Yes, one person. But we are part of a Metacomet Public Health Alliance with Rentham and Norfolk, and we do have one inspector that does 16 of our food establishments per month.
And how do we pay for that? Is that in your budget somewhere?
No,
How
that's,
do we,
The.
the revenue?
The
No,
regional
the-
one.
the food inspector, so there's a Department of Public Health has granted a grant to the host, which is Rentham, so it's Rentham, Norfolk, and Franklin. And that grant will pay for that particular inspector.
It just seemed like one person a lot, and I vaguely remember the thing from last year, maybe?
Which
The
thing?
collaborative or the
Yep, that's
thing in
what,
Rentham,
mhm,
yeah,
yep,
okay.
yep.
The memory ain't what it used to be. Board of Health, anybody? Nope. Disability Commission, I don't think there's any,
They just had their fair.
yes, they did.
On the weekends.
Basically tries to help them pay for their annual fair.
Is it something I said?
No,
No, she's good.
oh, she's coming back.
Never mind. So, no issues, Disability
Nope.
Commission? Very, very important stuff, I might add. Council on Aging.
Yep.
I noticed that you're advertising for a senior center director.
Yep.
Didn't she just get here?
Yeah.
And she's now leaving?
Yep.
Wow, is it, I'll ask the question, is it pay? Or is it
Uh,
other
nope.
stuff? Okay, that's fine.
No,
I-
definitely not pay.
Okay, that's fine, that was my concern.
No, actually, I think I think, as you know, Mr. Chairman, and just for others, I think the senior center, when Miss Alves retired, there was a little bit of trying to get back kind of onto a good footing after her leadership. There was a good example of somebody that was a department head here for a long time, whoever brought it up earlier, who was really probably two people in one. The senior center director, for those of you who didn't live here at the time, some of you may remember, the senior center was originally in the historical museum basement. And over 20, 25 years of her leadership led to getting in the historical museum and then going over and building the building that was over there. And really, at first, they built the first floor, and then the town built the second floor on top of it. But the programs, activities, and rooms and space were not being fully utilized to the best of their ability. And due to the leadership that was here, in addition to Sarah and all the other staff, I don't know who goes to the senior center often. I don't know if you do. Lauren, no? Natalie, no? Bill? Come on, Bill.
George
Bill.
and I like to go and talk finances with the crew in there.
The
We
thing
have a
with the
good- we have a
senior
good time
center,
with them.
yeah, right.
We
Well,
do.
maybe you will be at some point.
We have a good time, right?
Well, the food is great, very affordable price.
Yes.
The senior center also brings in a lot of revenue. So now you're into the departments like the Board of Health, the senior center, even the library a little bit, the recreation department. These are a lot of revenue generating departments, right? They do the Sunshine Club, they do a lot of fee programs down there, the Common Grounds Cafe. All that brings revenue in to pay for a lot of the expenses and/or staff that are there. And they do an absolutely marvelous job. Every time I go in, I cannot believe how vibrant and upbeat the place is. And someone who's now worked here for 9 years, it's hard to remember a time, Mr. Conley, where the building was as hopping as it is these days. And credit to all the staff down there for creating an incredible environment. The last note I want to make is last year, we did put in the budget, some people see $25,000 for transportation. That is actually for GATRA with a unique deal that allows our seniors, we cost share with GATRA to make sure our seniors have a more affordable ride to the senior center, because that's where our social workers are, that's where our food is, that's where the affordability is, and so we really want to make sure that people get there. I will say the van, as far as I know, because everybody asks me, will still hopefully be delivered this August. And so the van driver is now in the budget, and the administrative support to coordinate the van, as well as the administrative support to take on the enormous amount of social work cases that Raylene and the staff are seeing down there. We don't turn anyone away based on age. You don't need to have your AARP card, although I'm close and then I'll qualify. We don't turn anyone away. So the senior center social workers are not there just for seniors. There's a lot of clients that go in there, and that's one of the jobs actually that Amy was brought on, given her experience in her career, was brought on to help coordinate the incredibly huge need of social services in town that we're trying to work around.
Very good at Medicare questions, too.
Very good at medical there.
And
So
the-
you go to the senior center, George.
Not for, only for meetings.
When we
that
like to talk
Thursday morning
finances with the
group. I haven't
guys.
been in a while,
Good
but I
time.
suspect this will bring us back probably for a meeting or two.
Sounds good.
Free coffee all day?
All day?
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
The friend and the. and the
At
friend-
1:30, okay. Get there right at 1:30. Good tip, hot tip. We talked about in the past the CAP programs, right, do I have
Oh,
that right?
community assistance?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So is there a partnership between this building and the senior center to share that information as part of the social working
Absolutely.
aspect, which I know social work, I say that, it's very broad, the way
Very
I
broad.
just said that. But when people are looking for assistance and
Yeah.
things like that, as we talk about the override,
Yeah.
it's also available information then at the senior center
Absolutely.
to go and talk about.
Usually we have to
Savings.
direct, sometimes we have to direct people back to the department that is providing the service.
Correct, but at
like-
least they have a
but
central
they have all
spot.
the, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just add to that too,
Yeah,
Jamie?
sure.
The senior center was able to get a grant this year too, and they're working on it with some of the senior tax work-off program individuals in putting together an online resource guide.
Uh-huh.
And that's gonna have a lot of the CAP programs in it, as well as all kinds of resources from across the town.
What is their method of communication? Do they do a website and a mailer as well? Do we know? Or, I'm sorry, are you're the one?
Sarah's gonna follow up.
I think we answered all the questions.
Yeah. We
Hi.
got pretty far, Sarah. Now we
I'm
need-
Sarah, I'm the acting director at the senior center.
Nice
So our main form of communication to our constituents is a newsletter. So that gets mailed out to everyone who wants it in Franklin. If they're outside of Franklin, there's an additional fee for the postage, but we send. That also gets posted on the Franklin town website, along with anyone who's asked to have it sent to them via email. It goes out to them as well.
Thank you.
I read it every month.
It's good stuff.
It doesn't draw you in, no.
No, not yet.
Any other questions?
Where the hell, yeah.
Well, Sarah's up.
Veteran Services,
Good job,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Council on Aging,
Yep.
Veteran Services. This is, it's just us now, not a collaboration with somebody else, right?
Nope. It's just us. We don't have any more county agreements. We're very fortunate and lucky to have Shannon and a part-time in Deborah. And basically what you see here are some basic expenses that any department would have, but then the veteran services money that's in here is direct benefits under the law to our veterans in town.
Okay. On, Disability Commission, didn't we,
Yeah,
Already did that.
It's on the
Yeah.
advice.
is there enough?
Library?
Where am
This
I?
is not.
Yeah, Library. Nothing seems to change at the library, which is fine. Are we still, certified or qualified or whatever? We are, okay.
I don't, you can add, I think we're, if we took 75,000 or so in cuts, Felicia might be able to correct the number, but we're just a little bit over what's called MAR. MAR is like a 110-year-old statute from the Board of Library Commissioners, state agency that regulates how much you must spend if you have a public library. And if Felicia wants, if you want more, I'm sure she could answer more, but
That's all right.
otherwise you have to be on a waiver list. And we've gone 6 years not being on the waiver list, so we really don't want to go back.
Are books and publications actually buying the books and publications? Is that line item?
Steve, see, even I can do it now.
What a win.
Steve got no exercise tonight at all.
Yeah. Felicia Odie, library director. Yeah, we're not publishing anything. It was just, that account was called Books and Publications years and years back. It's just a books, it's for print, the print collections, audio collection, and digital collections. So that's the total amount that we use for all of our collections, you know, and that's the account that we use.
How much of that do you use towards actual physical books? Roughly 50%?
Yes, the book is still king. For everybody who wants to think, oh,
Spoken as a
digital
true
is going to
I know.
replace us,
Right.
not anytime soon. So it's over 50%,
Book is
Jenny,
still
yes.
king.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I just want to say, I heard the presentation that you and Miss Kaylee did the
Yeah.
other day, and it was, I'm really glad that you had the opportunity to speak to such a wide audience, to let people know. I think the library is one of the best assets to this
Oh,
town, so.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another pet peeve, we don't get to, we spent what, 12, $13 million on the addition and the upgrades? What, 7 or 8 years?
7 or 8 years ago?
But that doesn't add in to maintaining your accreditation or whatever.
That's why I call it a 110-year-old statute that needs to be
Just-
updated, but we can't. And actually, this is part of the stuff that I think Heather was talking about earlier, though. People don't know these things, right? I mean, we can't just cut 300,000. You know, we can't just slim a lot of these budgets, right? Like, there's a law in the books that we have to follow, or else we're in the doghouse, so.
It's not the only old law that.
No.
Or old person, never mind. Recreation. I see him sitting over there.
Yep. I mean,
He makes-
Ryan's,
All I know is that if we spend 700,000, 800,000, he's gonna get damn near all of it back,
that's well said.
if not all of it, right? I
Yep.
think as the finance committee, that's what we need to know. He's a net zero. Right in line. Anybody, he's right there, anybody's questions? Okay. Boy, people out there are getting off easy tonight, I tell you. Historical Museum
Yep,
and Historical Commission,
yep.
we now have an archivist?
We
is
now
that
have a
correct?
full-time archivist. The Historical Museum, Rowan, is behind somewhere. I'm not getting it right tonight because I keep turning in the wrong directions, obviously. You know, I mean, this has been a long time coming. I think we've talked about it for several years. This was part-time for a long time, but with all the capital projects down there and all of the operational needs, you know, that go on at the museum, and if we really want the museum to be a place that people can use at night, be able to rent it out, you know, be open more often during the weeks, you know, and be a part of the central fabric of the community, you really need somebody there to, at least one person to oversee it full time. People ask me all the time, then what's the difference between the museum and the commission? Really not much, other than the Historical Commission really gives a lot of advice to the archivist, and tries to guide some of the events, like last week's events on the Armenian exhibits. So they really do a lot of the exhibit work and the suggestion work at the commission. There's one legal responsibility the Historical Commission has, which is to deal with demolition delays in our bylaw, but that has no real budget impact other than advertising, so other than that, that's basically what it
What's
is.
the name of the guy that does the presentations all the time?
Jim Johnson, Joe Landry.
Joe Landry. I actually found him on my family tree.
Wow.
I gotta talk to him about
You could be a featured speaker at the
Yep.
Historical Museum.
Line item.
You can put him on the list, Ron. Right?
He's just one of the 7,100 people on it. He's there. We're getting.
Any
moving.
questions for,
I love it.
no? Okay.
Historical Commission, Arts and Culture,
Yeah.
relatively new too, right?
Brand new department. Corey Shea was hired earlier this year. This is the budget at the full amount, not just the salary. I also did move out of the town administrator's budget all of the money relating to her salary that was in there this year, as well as the expenses that were in my budget. So my budget actually ended up going down a bunch of money. Just for those that weren't knowledgeable, we put the position in half for FY24. So a salary level of January 1 to June 30th. And now this represents the full salary plus all the expenses. And to the sustainability coordinator's point, or the folks advocating for that, you know, in all likelihood, there's a couple things here. One, you know, over the next couple of years, this position will also be critical in working with Amy on townwide marketing and all the economic development projects we have leading up to the World Cup in a couple of years as well. Art brings people, it's an economic development position from our standpoint. Number one, it brings people, or should bring people into Franklin, which is eating out, catering, doing things around here, maybe even staying the weekend. There's a brand new hotel, cheap plug, Home 2 Suites, that just opened up. And also will help with the marketing projects, but also this position will in all likelihood bring in a lot of grant money that's available at the state level as well.
So a lot of, we're going through this and when I went through it before, there's a lot of new positions, but were these something that we were already doing and we're kind of just shifting them into their own line items now because their position is growing, the description is growing?
Exactly.
Is that what it is?
Some of it's just to highlight, right?
To
So like
highlight.
arts and culture is a good example. We just wanted to highlight, you know, the more you highlight it, the more attention it gets, and hopefully not just the people support it per se, but hopefully it can continue to grow with somebody managing and trying to work with the cultural council and the cultural district committee and a lot of the other arts stakeholders in towns. Hopefully a broader vision of how to bring people into Franklin to see our art and to be able to do more stuff within the town will hopefully provide a little bit more revenue. Same thing with conservation. So
But
these
also
are
mean-
things though that have already
Yeah.
been in the budget.
Yeah.
We're just moving them
Moving.
around just to try to give them
Just
a
to
little more
clarify that there
focus.
weren't 20 new positions
Right.
created this year, but
These
they
were
were
all in
already
the
there,
FY
they're just
'24
moving.
or previous budgets for years.
Yeah, got it.
Exactly.
Was this?
It's a good question. I mean, those,
Just the other,
the procurement officer, the conservation agent were all in the budget for years. Those are actually required by law, by the way. And the arts and culture position was already in FY '24, and we're just carrying it over and making it its own unique department. It's a great question.
Was the sustainability manager in the budget for FY '24 and had to be cut? This was
No.
sort of a new ask for this year that just didn't materialize.
It's a new ask based off the council goals in January.
Yeah.
And it just, we want it. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll put it in the moment I have it. It's
Right.
just about the school issue. I think it just kind of got cut out the last
Yeah,
minute.
were there any other roles like that, or was that the only one? The only new ad that had to be cut?
Yeah, that was the only new
That
ad.
was the only one?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
A quick question, actually, or just a comment, and I don't want to add extra work, although this is an ask for extra work. On the, because there's been so many questions about personnel, on the personnel, the salary sheets, it would be awesome if there was a column for like, this is a new role, this is like got moved into a new cost center, this is the first full year of it, because I think that would probably kill a lot of our questions.
If anybody
Along that
needs-
same vein, I was thinking it would be, and again, it's more work, but having at the end of each one, this is roughly how much is allocated to the schools. Quick visual cues are key for people who are just sort of skimming these reports versus diving into the details. So having, this is new but fully loaded, full year this, also roughly this much percentage, it can vary year to year. I know that's really hard based on things you said, but 20% of this is at the schools, 80% of this is at the schools. Just quick, very quick visual cues sometimes answer the hard, long-winded question can be answered with one line. Sometimes you can't get there, but
It'll take a little while for me to do the school piece.
yeah.
The denoting a new staff, we could probably do probably on the personnel sheets.
Yeah.
So we'll work on that certainly for next year. The school issue, ebbs and flows. This right here is really the accounting breakdown of the
Yeah.
budget. And I would never encourage anybody to read the 120-page budget narrative, in which all of that is in there. It is long, I understand it, I agree, cues are good. I'll just have to find a creative way to do that within the budget book. Because I certainly am well aware that I'm serious, I know it's a lot to ask people to dive through a budget narrative of 100 pages. But we try to break it out in that.
Yeah.
We do have charts on some of this stuff, but I understand that it's hard for people to
People who aren't
I wouldn't read my town's
finance-minded,
budget book
right?
either.
I know, right.
And I do this for a
And there are a
living.
lot of people who just don't have
Yeah.
that aren't finance-minded.
Absolutely.
So sometimes a quick.
Heather will teach them how to do it.
anytime.
Heather's,
We're gonna go down to the senior center or the library, one of the two. It's gonna be
Those are great ideas, though,
Yeah.
and I think over the years we've tried
We'll
to take
live stream
comments like
as well.
that you brought, and tried to incorporate them. Just take a little time to figure out how and how to. On the school issue, in terms of breaking it out, it changes every year. It might be
It could
helpful,
change month to month.
but
I mean, I know
yeah,
that, yeah.
But I just got to figure out a creative way to make sure it illustrates what we're trying to
Yeah,
illustrate.
yeah.
It's certainly a great idea, and I just got to think it through, make
Yeah.
sure we're doing the right thing.
And maybe it's historical, and there's no way to forward,
Right.
but maybe historically this has run at 60% or, just.
That's exactly what the fiscal budget director is supposed to
It's
do.
supposed
It
to
really
do,
is. I
yeah.
mean, when you look at our website with all the historical data appendices,
Yeah.
all of that, and other data sets, right? That people ask questions all the time, could you give us 10 years of collective bargaining COLA increases? We go and do a lot of work to put that together, but I want to maintain that in perpetuity so we have those data sets always available. Because it's really a lot, as you know, to go back and try to dig out all that work. It takes the whole week, 2 weeks. So those are really, really great points, and it's exactly what the budget director position is intended to do, is to try to keep all these data sets moving forward and figure out how to write a document that illustrates things a little clearer to exactly what you're saying, Lauren.
Okay. Where are we? Cultural District Committee. I missed that.
Well, the cultural council was right before it.
Yeah.
which is just $25,000. It's the same as it was last year.
Not a lot of money involved, just a what is it, I guess, would be the
It goes to grants.
grants.
Yep. And we get a match from the state, so.
All right, moving right along. Debt and interest. The only question I have, and it's in somewhere in there, what's falling off and what's the total, what do we pay every year for past debts? I see Chris sitting down there going, he's asking a question again.
It looks like to me, while Kerry or Chris are walking up to the mic, it looks like to me, is Horace Mann coming off the books?
Yeah, nobody's moving, Jamie.
I was like, while they're walking in the
I think it's important
if
that
you
people
look,
understand that stuff is coming off.
well,
But you made that a point at one of the meetings, I know that.
Hi, Carrie Bertoni, Treasurer Collector. Yes, your Horace Mann is coming off. Keller Sullivan will be coming off. The two main that are going to stay on is the Franklin High School. And then we are looking at, the next one would be coming on would be the police station from
from a
the
debt,
debt
from a
exclusion.
debt exclusion would likely be the police station. The next debt and service that'll likely be on here will be the Remington Jefferson remodel and the
Yep.
Horace Mann roof.
Those are your projected in the future, you
Yep.
project that there'll be a debt exclusion for
No.
those two items? Is that
No,
what you're saying?
that's not a debt exclusion.
Oh, I thought that's what,
So
okay.
No,
police
we would
station
borrow.
would be a debt exclusion.
Yeah.
The Remington Jefferson, which is approximately 8 million for borrowing, and Horace Mann roof would be 2 million. That would be a borrowing. And we'd be borrowing for that in FY '25, '6.
325 for 26.
That's the 3.5% of the budget borrowing.
Yeah, we're way far away from
Yep.
that. We're 2% lower than where we want to be, but I think partly because the town did so much work in the early 2000s, now that's all falling off. What you're going to see now with RJ and Horace Mann and then some other buildings by the end of the decade is you're going to hit that 30-year life. And so 2030 and after, you're going to see 28, 29, 30, 31, somewhere in that range, you're going to start seeing the Keller Sullivan renovation project or the Horace Mann renovation project, like other major renovations to those buildings. Because at the 30-year mark, then you want to get another 30 years out of those buildings, which is exactly what part of the school study said relative to the capital savings revolving around Parmenter in particular, but obviously Kennedy, because both of those schools are far older and will eventually have far larger needs and expensive needs to maintain those schools for the appropriate use that they need to be in the future. So, the debt exclusion, Heather, is a vote of the taxpayers. I'm guessing that that's how the police station would have to be financed, but, I won't know for a couple more years.
And so when we have, I know we've talked about the AAA bond rating and how it can impact our interest rates. Are they all considered 30-year terms?
No.
So
Could be
what,
most of them were 20.
okay,
And I'm hoping that the borrowing that we just referenced with RJ and Horace Mann is 10. Because the longer the note, the more interest you pay over the long term. And I've made it clear about my disdain for interest. I can't stand it. But on a project like Remington Jefferson at that cost,
yeah.
You could stretch it over 20 years, but you'd be paying a boatload more in interest.
Okay.
When is that thought to be scheduled? I'm just thinking about the school committee's plan to use RJ for more than it is now, quotes more. Does that get in the way? You don't want, personally, I don't want to see that whole thing interrupted, I guess is the word.
I mean,
So I don't know when RJ, and is it when you say renovation, is it something where
roof,
you gotta close the
roof,
stuff?
fire extinguisher, the whole thing.
Okay, but it can be done while the building is still in use or around its use?
Right.
Okay.
Summers, vacations. I mean, the engineers and architects plan, the OPM plans all that stuff.
I like the plan they have, and I just don't wanna get in the way.
Okay.
You know?
And I just want to correct, I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. I thought this was a debt exclusion screen that was up. So really what's falling off is your DPW building, some of those projects. But we really don't, every year we're losing 2 or 3. So a lot of the stuff is falling off. And we haven't, we do little borrowings down at the end. We did the fire truck, we did technology, and of course a municipal building, so.
All right. You want to do your spiel on employee benefits, sir?
My spiel?
Well, what happened, is it up, down,
Yep.
left, right?
Up.
Up.
Employee benefits are hard to go down. If you look up at the screen right now, we have it broken out, generally into categories. Karen can answer a few of these for folks that have questions, but you got the retirement. This is another one of those, Heather, that probably online they don't get, but this is the pension assessment. Retirement assessment is a law. We just have to pay the bill. The number's been coming down a little bit since the pandemic. Employee health care, about a 7.6% increase. That's the bad news. The good news is we have an insurance advisory committee made up of all of the union representatives and the school and municipal administrations. I can tell you this, if we didn't have the IAC and we weren't working together, those numbers would be awfully worse. We were able to introduce a high deductible HSA option for employees 5 or 6 years ago, which has been very popular. Saved employees money and saved us money. Come to find out, 2/3 of our employees don't even hit the high deductible number, so they're really saving a lot of money in their checks. And we make a contribution by law of 25% of the savings goes back into a contribution from the community in either $750 or $1,500 into their health savings accounts, whether it's an individual or a family. Health insurance to me doesn't always feel like a big win. It's a lot of work, and I give Karen and Stacy and Diane a lot of credit for all the effort they've put in. It's been great to have Diane here and have some additional bandwidth. We're part of a regional collaborative, for lack of a better word, with like 20 other towns and districts. Tri-County's in with us, Medway's in with us, and basically it's a bulk purchasing. Essentially, we're getting Harvard Pilgrim at a bulk purchasing rate, and the reason why is basically we've just got to go through a lot more pain and agony to kind of get there. We have a whole board dynamic and a whole regional agreement, but it's been able to withstand some pretty heavy pressures. Our employee loss runs are not always good. For those of you who don't know what loss runs are, they're really what the provider takes in versus what they pay out. And when I first got here, we've always ranged between about 90% and 105. But recently we've had about 100, 101, 99. We're really on that place where like any provider breaks even with us in terms of what they bring in for revenue and what they pay out. In fact, there's been several years or a few years where the providers have lost money. And so until we find ways to get our own health somewhere better off as a unit, we're going to still face tough challenges with employee health insurance. A poll was just put out among Norfolk County towns that Amy and I was on, asking about rate splits. So out of the 25 towns in Norfolk County, as I was just reading through the email chain, we are the lowest. So we're a 68-32 split. 68 employer, 32 employee. Most communities are 70-30. There's a few generous ones I saw in there, and I'm not going to mention those names because I don't want any employees going over to that town, that are at 85-15 still. So when we want to talk about recruitment and we want to talk about retention, particularly of teachers, that's a big one. So if we want to go in the opposite direction, back to 70-30 or 75-25, those numbers right there are going to go way up. And the same would be said for the school department. But generally I give the employee unions and all of us just a lot of credit for sitting in this room 6 to 7 times a year and going through with our consultants on healthcare. It's not the the most positive meetings all the time, but people really have a great sense of the history, and they do a great job working with us. We've been able to maintain plan design for several years, so that's been also helpful to create less disruption for our employees. Then we just got other random stuff in here. Retired teachers' life insurance, retired teacher GIC insurance. Actually, in the municipal budget, you can see it's gone down. Over the years, this has been one area of savings in the benefits, which has helped out a lot. Where, you know, some years ago, Jeff, I think there was a retirement boom or something. I don't even know how it came about, but somehow got embedded in the municipal budget to pay out the GIC health insurance for retired teachers. Again, those are the things I think Heather was bringing up earlier, these kind of misnomers in the community, like where is all this money coming from? Well, it's in the municipal side of the budget. If we didn't have that cost in our side of the budget, it would be in the school department's budget. If you go to most school departments and they have a benefit like that where they're paying for the GIC, for the retired teachers' insurance, it's in the school department budget. But here it's not, because our operations are so commingled in everything we do. Same thing with workers' comp, OPEB, unemployment, all of those are both town and school related that apply to both. And that's really the highest level overview I can give probably of public benefits.
So when you say unemployment comp, if the override doesn't go through, we've heard in presentations,
Yep.
there'll be a reduction in force. So would this number want to be increased to prepare for something like that?
That is an excellent question and an excellent example of why we don't go through right now and say if an override didn't pass, what would we get rid of?
Right.
Because that's a line item that when we have greater certainty in June, the superintendent and school business administrator and I should be together talking about what those dynamics are. But that is an excellent example of a line item that will likely have to go up, okay? Or will just soften from attrition in other avenues on that account. So if somebody, for example, this is the saddest way to say it, but if somebody passed away who was in the retired teacher health insurance line item, you might save 6 months of insurance from somebody or a family member or something like that. I'm just using that as an example. You know, one of those other line items, somebody on the town side may not take health insurance, right? Or we fill somebody who retired with somebody who's 24 and still on their parents' insurance. So that line item up there with the 3.9 million would be lower. Sometimes that number in unemployment could get compensated by some of those other line items because it's a bottom line budget. So if that line item goes up too much and 2 or 3 other ones have surplus, we can usually cover that increase in that one part. In this circumstance, I don't know if that's going to be the case, and that's going to be one area to focus on after June, is to see what happens in that number based on the superintendent's projections.
Because this is unemployment comp for the entire, everybody.
Yeah.
Yep.
We pay we pay the unemployment from the, and I won't speak for Karen, but I believe a lot of that number has been generally built recently based on the, what do they call it? Enrollment-based reductions, from the declining enrollment, right? So some of that's been just baked into the budget for several years. And I know the pandemic had some weird years to it, but other than that, that's been pretty steady for a while.
And just a question about, I had highlighted it earlier, other post-employment benefits, it's 850 grand, so.
Yep.
Could you have a couple examples? What is other? What is that?
Health insurance.
It's all health insurance?
It's almost all health insurance.
But you pull it out?
It's Heather, I am heartbroken that you don't know OPEB.
That's another level.
I might spare the audience tonight. Maybe
I
we
could
can talk about OPEB on the
international
side.
tax,
What's
but-
that? It's what? Oh. It's other post-employment benefits, which is a huge liability
Oh, all right, I got you.
on our financial sheets and the OPEB trust that
Oh,
we've
'cause
created.
all right.
Yeah, it's the sexy OPEB word that
Got
everybody
it.
uses. So our liability is now 60 million, down from the like 70 million or something like that.
Okay.
And is
It's mystified me for years.
Right?
every February, our actuarial does a presentation at the council meeting to give us the good news that we are actually in very, very good financial shape.
Yeah.
Our policy has been in place for 7 years, and it's a policy that needs to stick in place. It's been doing its work. And that does, by the way, affect teachers, educators, the school department, and municipal employees, just so everybody knows.
So in essence, if you were to do a reduction in force, it actually could cost a lot more.
Yep.
Rather than having the additional override money on the budget.
I think
If you had
one
to
of the
reduce,
school
it would
committee
cost more.
members and one of the counselors had made a mention of that at our March meeting.
March, okay.
About the give and take between both sides of the budget. You may have one go down a little bit, that may be natural, but another side of the budget can float up to the top. That's right.
Good.
I am.
I think that's the end of the line for this evening.
And property and casualty.
Oh, risk,
Risk management, one of my favorite things in the world. Just kidding.
I don't think, the control of that is in other hands. Questions of anything else, guys, girls? Jamie, anything?
Is there anything else on the
Oh,
agenda?
the agenda looks for, future agenda items. I would assume that means the June meeting, 17th, I think? But
I have not that far, thought that far in
you know,
advance.
I was gonna say, there's so much going on. We'll worry about future agenda items
Yeah.
when the future arrives.
That's probably when you look at a revised budget, is my guess.
Okay. Motion to adjourn from someone?
Motion
Heather?
to adjourn.
You want me to?
Nicole, you there?
Yep. Natalie,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
William,
Yes.
Jenna,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yep.
George,
Okay, yes,
Nicole is yes.
we are adjourned.
Thank you,
Till
everyone.
tomorrow. Yes,
Thank you very
thanks.
much.
Thanks for putting up
Home for
with this.
dessert, George.